Before the Great Flood, the world was not as we know it. It was a place of giants, fallen angels, and secrets so dangerous they were almost erased from history. In this video, we'll uncover the story of the Watchers, their rebellion, the Nephilim they created, and why their warning still matters today. Take a moment to like this video, subscribe, and join us as we step into one of the most mysterious stories ever told. Imagine towering beings so large they could crush stone walls with their bare hands. Civilizations so corrupt even the animals were violent. This wasn't some fantasy novel, this was the pre-flood world created by the Watchers and their Nephilim children. We've decoded the ancient texts that reveal why this story was almost erased from history, and what it warns us about today. The Watchers were supposed to be heaven's guardians, divine beings sent to observe and guide early humanity. They weren't meant to interfere, just to watch. But something changed. These celestial messengers began seeing human women, and soon they weren't just observers anymore. They became participants in a story that would unravel everything. The Book of Enoch describes their rebellion in detail. Around 200 Watchers, led by figures like Shemi-Haza and Azazel, made a pact. They swore an oath to descend to earth and take human wives. This wasn't just a violation of their duty, it was an open defiance of divine law. Once they crossed that line, their rebellion only deepened. But it wasn't just forbidden relationships that doomed them. The Watchers brought dangerous knowledge to humanity. According to ancient texts, Azazel taught people how to forge swords, shields, and armor. Technology that turned simple conflicts into wars. Others shared secrets of enchantments, astrology, and even how to manipulate metals and gemstones. The Book of Enoch lists these teachings as direct causes of the world's corruption. Suddenly, humanity had access to knowledge it wasn't ready for, and the results were catastrophic. Violence spread like a disease. People learned to make weapons before they learned restraint. The Watchers didn't just break heavenly law, they broke the balance of human civilization. Even nature itself seemed to turn darker, with animal attacks and unchecked bloodshed becoming common. Their choices had consequences. The Watchers didn't just fall, they dragged creation down with them. Their rebellion wasn't just about breaking rules, it was about crossing boundaries no one was meant to cross. And in doing so, they set the stage for something even worse, their own monstrous offspring. This is the heart of their cautionary tale. Power, even in the hands of angels, corrupts when untempered by restraint. The Watchers had wisdom beyond human limits and used it recklessly. Their story isn't just ancient history. It's a warning about what happens when knowledge outpaces wisdom. And their legacy was only just beginning. Their children, the Nephilim, would become the next nightmare. The children of the Watchers and human women weren't just unusual, they were unnatural. The Nephilim, as they became known, stood as living proof of a boundary that shouldn't have been crossed. Biblical texts describe them as mighty men of old, but other ancient sources paint a darker picture. These weren't heroes, they were giants who brought terror to the earth. Their size alone set them apart. The Book of Numbers references their remnants, describing beds over 13 feet long, artifacts from a race of beings too large to fit into normal human civilization. Ancient historians like Josephus wrote about their extraordinary strength, claiming they could uproot mountains with their bare hands. But physical power wasn't their only advantage. As hybrids of celestial and human bloodlines, they carried the forbidden knowledge of their fallen angel fathers. This corrupted lineage spread quickly. The Book of Enoch describes how the Nephilim consumed everything around them: food, resources, even people. Without restraint, they turned violent. Some texts suggest they hunted humans for sport, or committed acts so brutal they defy description. Their very existence warped the natural order, infecting the world with a kind of chaos that couldn't be undone. Archaeology hints at their legacy. Across cultures, from Greece's Cyclops myths to the giant skeletons occasionally uncovered in ancient burial sites, there are traces of something inexplicable. The Babylonian epic of Gilgamesh speaks of a half-divine giant who stood against the gods themselves. Even indigenous legends from the Americas tell of towering warriors who ruled before a great flood. These stories suggest the shadow of the Nephilim stretched far beyond the biblical record. But their reign couldn't last. The deeper the corruption spread, the more irreversible it became. The Nephilim weren't just violent, they were destabilizing creation itself. Genesis describes the world as filled with violence, a direct result of their influence. Every act of tyranny, every war, every unnatural distortion traced back to their hybrid origin. Even the land itself seemed to groan under their weight. That's why the flood became inevitable. The Nephilim represented more than just physical giants. They were living violations of the boundary between heavenly and earthly. Their existence proved that some lines, once crossed, can't be uncrossed. The world had reached a tipping point where only total destruction could cleanse what they had corrupted. Their story isn't just about ancient monsters. It's about the danger of disrupting the natural order. Whether through forbidden knowledge or genetic tampering, the Nephilim show what happens when power outpaces restraint. And while the flood erased them from the earth, their warning remains. Some doors, once opened, can't be closed. By the time the flood came, the world had crossed a point of no return. Genesis describes a planet where violence wasn't just widespread, it was fundamental. Every intent of the thoughts of the heart was only evil continually. This wasn't ordinary wickedness, it was systemic corruption, a complete breakdown of the divine order that began when the Watchers first crossed that line. The decision to bring the flood didn't come lightly. Ancient Jewish texts suggest there were warnings. 120 years of them, giving humanity time to change, but the damage was too deep. The Watchers' forbidden teachings had spread too far, and their Nephilim offspring had made the earth dangerous in ways we can barely imagine. The contamination wasn't just moral, it had altered creation itself. Something radical had to be done. Noah stands out as the lone counterpoint. While the world embraced its corruption, he maintained his integrity. The text is careful to note that he walked with God when everyone else had turned away. His righteousness wasn't perfect, just persistent. That made all the difference. When the waters came, they weren't just punishment. They were purification, a reset for a world that had lost its way. Other cultures remembered this event too. The Mesopotamian epic of Gilgamesh details a flood sent by gods angry at humanity's noise. The Greeks had Deucalion's flood, where Zeus wiped out a corrupt Bronze Age. Even indigenous Australian stories speak of a great deluge punishing lawlessness. These parallels suggest something cataclysmic happened, something so traumatic it burned itself into humanity's collective memory. But the biblical account carries an important distinction. This wasn't arbitrary divine anger. It was measured justice. The Watchers had broken barriers, and humanity had followed their lead. By mixing divine and human DNA, sharing forbidden arts and embracing violence, they'd warped creation beyond repair. The flood wasn't just about stopping evil, it was about preserving any chance at a future. Today, we face our own boundary questions. Genetic engineering, artificial intelligence, climate change. We're pushing limits faster than we can understand them. The flood story asks us to consider, when does progress become corruption? When does knowledge become danger? Like Noah, we may soon need to decide what to preserve and what to leave behind. The waters came once. The question isn't whether they could again, but whether we're listening to the warnings this time. The Watchers failed to restrain themselves. Will we? The Watcher's fall wasn't just an ancient warning, it's a blueprint for our own crossroads. Today, we're the ones handling forbidden knowledge, editing genes, building artificial minds, pushing boundaries without understanding the consequences. The question isn't whether we can cross these lines, but whether we should. The flood story reminds us that some thresholds, once passed, change everything. Power without wisdom corrupts, whether it's wielded by angels or scientists. So as we stand at our own ethical frontiers, the choice remains: repeat the Watcher's mistakes or learn from them. The next reset button might not be a flood, but will we need one?